Okay.
And
Okay. So now you're going out on campuses. Do you remember the first time you did this?
Oh yeah, University of Wisconsin-Madison.
Okay. Tell me about that.
I drove up there. We had a singular student.
And who's we?
Well, we being like, actually Bill Montgomery came with me to that one, but he kind of just was in the shadows. I literally had a card table that I brought from my parents' house and set it up right there on the campus, University of Wisconsin-Madison. I think I still have a picture of this. And I had some sign that said, "Big government sucks," a little provocative.
Yeah.
And I sat there at a chair, and I think a student would come up maybe once every 15 minutes. And I was there trying to solicit to try to get a chapter started there at University of Wisconsin-Madison.
And that was a Turning Point chapter.
That's right, correct.
So this was partly a recruitment drive.
It was a recruitment drive, and to see if there was any interest, and also to try to, and to be perfectly honest, I love the debate. I love the exploration of ideas. I think dialogue is a gift given to us by God. I really, in the pursuit of truth. And, being able to debate some of these college kids was really life-giving. It was exhilarating to me as a 19-year-old.
Well, that is a university education. That's
what
a
it should be.
Socratic education.
Right? It's what
sure. Well, and there is historical precedent for what you're doing. I mean, I remember, for example, outside the Stuart, or the building I worked in at the University of Toronto, there was quite frequently a card table set up, and it was the bloody communists that were at the back of that. So
that's what was so funny. Is very rarely is it our side that does this.
Yeah.
And then there's an element here that I think you've gone around the edges on that I want to dive into. I was viewed as unseemly by the conservative establishment because the conservative way of doing things, it's not to go set up a card table.
No, definitely not.
It was to speak properly.
Yeah.
And to go to Stanford and to get the highest possible education. And what I was unknowingly on the cutting edge of was something you mentioned earlier, is that conservatives have now become low trust of institutions and liberals have become high trust of institutions. Whereas liberals are the ones that will defend the FDA and they'll defend the CDC and they'll defend Pfizer and they'll defend the intelligence.
That's defending Pfizer. That's really.
But they will.
Yeah.
Because they're high trust of institutions.
Because there's no one more trustworthy from a leftist perspective than Big Pharma.
But they find themselves defending institutions.
Yeah.
In the 1960s, they were low trust of institutions. Don't send us to war. There is.
Yeah.
Whereas today, actually, and I was on the cutting edge of this, was in 2012, 2013, 14, conservatives were still on the high trust of institutions.
Okay, so let me rephrase that slightly.
Please,
Because
but you understand what I'm trying to communicate.
I do. Well, there's a real conundrum there because a conservative with low trust in institutions is like an oxymoron, right? Well, but
we're trying to conserve something the institutions have destroyed.
Well, okay, that's the thing. So imagine that there's a hierarchy of institution. There's the fringe of the institution that's pretty exploratory. You can move into the center that's more conservative. Then you can move right to the bottom, which is, well, what? Well, I would say it's religious. Fundamentally, as you move towards the core,
that's right.
You move towards what's more religious. And so the conservative stance isn't anti-institution. It's a stance that notes that, I know what's happened. In the story of Moses, when Moses goes off to get the commandments, so he's the pipeline to God, right? He leaves his brother in charge, Aaron.
They have a rave party.
That's exactly right. They make this golden calf, which is a materialistic object, and they dance naked in the streets and have an orgy. And that's what happens to the political when it's detached from the sacred, when it loses
that's exactly right.
Okay, so it isn't that the conservatives have become skeptical of institutions. It's that the conservatives have noted that the institutions no longer serve the purpose for which they were established.
Chartered.
Right? Chartered, exactly. And they're objecting, and that's happening everywhere. And that's part of this radical secularization.
Yes.
It's not just secularization, because there should be a separation between church and state, let's say. It's not that the institutions have become secular, it's that they've turned 180 degrees from their original orientation and are now rampaging as madly as possible in the other direction. So the universities are no longer the fortress walls against the barbarians. They're actually the voice of the barbarians, right? Hence the pro-Hamas demonstrations on campus.
Or the Black Lives Matter stuff, or the transgender stuff. That's very well said.
Exactly. Okay, but we got to get that terminology exactly right, because it's very dangerous for conservatives to conceptualize themselves as anti-institutional, because then they become indistinguishable from the radicals.
Sure.
That So it isn't that, it's a return to the sorts of things we talked about at the beginning, like Wilberforce.
That's
and
right.
Those foundational principles.
Yes.
And you're going to campuses saying, you people have lost the plot.
Exactly.
Right, which they definitely have. Like there's the universities, I cannot see, I've been working in various ways to figure out how to revitalize the universities, and the bricks and mortar universities. Like, how do you revitalize an institution that's dominated by people who are aiming in the wrong direction?
They're irredeemable.
So what does that mean? Okay, so let's continue practically here. So tell me what happens the first time at Wisconsin.
Conversation every 15 minutes. A couple kids were interested, found a chapter leader.
You found a chapter.
Yeah,
okay, so that was success.
So it was a success. We found a couple groups of people and we started the group. And then I did it at Marquette University because I had a friend that went there.
And so you walked away from that. How did you feel when you
Exhilarated.
Walked away? You did.
Because then I was able to go back to 2 or 3 people giving us money.
And say.
And they gave us $500. I said, now we have a chapter. We can, and they said, okay, well, let us know how it goes. Proof of concept.
Right.
And so then we did it at Marquette, and we did it at University of Illinois, and we did it at Indiana.
So you went from 0 to 1, which is a huge leap.
It was a huge lift.
It's a huge leap.
Because getting that second chapter was so much easier than ex nihilo.
Of course. 0 to 1 is, the first customer is impossible.
And then
the second one's hard.
It was one of the most fulfilling days in Turning Point USA history.
Right, okay.
Was being able to get a singular chapter.
Right, of course, because that's the one that's most unlikely.
Exactly.
Your first sale is by far the most unlikely.
Exactly.
Right, okay, so then you went to Marquette.
Then Marquette.
Okay, and what happened there?
Very similar situation, but it was also a friend of somebody in high school, and they were a private school, so it was a little harder to do the typical outreach, but they applied for a permit in like the student center, and same sort of thing.
So you were permitted from the beginning as well?
Well, in UW-Madison, they don't care as much because it was a public school. So you can kind of, any individual can walk on campus and kind of.
Right, okay.
But Marquette, I had a friend that I went to high school with. They said, yeah, I'll apply for something for you.
Okay.
And similar sort of thing. And they said, I sat there for 5 hours, Jordan. I would sit there for 5 or 6 hours.
Yeah.
Because that was time well spent. Because for me, I was trying to build the semblance of something, a real infrastructure, a real organization. And boy, was it difficult.
Yeah.
But it was never disheartening though, because I had nothing to lose. You have to understand, I'm an 18, 19-year-old kid.
Right.
It's not like I'm mortgaging the house. It's not like I have two kids.
Yeah.
So there's such low downside and unlimited upside.
Right, sure. Well, that's the entrepreneurial niche.
And it was such an adventure because it's a campus I've never been to, talking to a bunch of kids. It's, you're almost having verbal combat, which is very entertaining.
Well, and I imagine too that it must have been heartening to you as well to see that you could hold your own.
Exactly. And so that's a really important point. Here I am as a kid that didn't go to college thinking, do I really have the intellectual capacity to joust with kids that are learning all day long?
Yeah,
I
right.
realized they're not learning all day long.
Yeah.
You see, I was reading von Mises and Rothbard before I came across you.
Yeah.
Hayek, Milton Friedman, very libertarian economics was my baseline foundational philosophy. A lot of reasons for that. Very, very interesting. Tons of profound insights, some of which don't, I think, actually play out very well in the material world. But so I would encounter kids on campuses who professed to be studying economics, for example, and they didn't know very much.